You're listening to The Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
Let's get the latest with Deshaun Watson and his ongoing legal battle. A lot of different developments have occurred over the last couple of days. And our next guest, he's been on the show a bunch throughout this process, breaking down everything going on with Deshaun and the 22 civil suits that have been filed against him. He is Mike Meltser, a host on Sirius XM's Mad Dog Sports Radio. He's lived in Houston for the last 9 years doing radio, and he's also a lawyer, so there's nobody better, as I continue to say, to talk about the story than Mike, and he joins us now on our progressive guest line. Mike, appreciate it, as always. Thanks for being with us.
Jake, good morning. How are you?
I'm hanging in, man. So what do you make of the latest with this case? I saw Deshaun's lawyer, Rusty Hardin, said that it appears one of the plaintiffs has dismissed her case. Is there a big significance to that?
I'm not sure, Jake, if there's a big significance. People were wondering after Friday's hearings, in which Deshaun Watson's defense won the ability in 14 of the cases, which would have applied to all of them eventually, that the plaintiffs, the accusers, had to put their names on it. Some were wondering, okay, would this lead to, let's say, a cascade of accusers going away? And it seems like that has not happened, in that as of now, we have gone from 22 cases only down to 21. So it appears that only one of the accusers has decided, hey, the publicity and the ensuing fallout is going to be too much to deal with for now, and so I'm not going to proceed. But there are still 21 lawsuits left.
What do you think is the next big step in this whole process? I mean, it seems like by the day things could change, but based on your experience and maybe what you've been hearing from people you speak with, where does this thing go from here?
So I don't know if it's a big thing, Jake, but the next development that I know we're going to see is at some point in the next couple of weeks, maybe let's say by the next 2 Mondays, Deshaun Watson will have to file answers to the lawsuits. Now, in the state of Texas, you can issue what's called a general denial, in which you deny all the accusations, and almost every defendant is going to do a general denial. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of affirmative defenses that he puts in those answers. And an affirmative defense is a defense where you're basically saying, even if all of what you're saying is true, I am still not liable because of something. Like, let's give an example. Jake, if like you punched me 10 years ago and you sued me now, then in my answer, my affirmative defense on, assault, on battery would be, hey, yes, this actually happened and this fight happened, but this happened 10 years ago. My affirmative defense is statute of limitations. And so I'm curious to see what kind of affirmative defenses Watson is going to put in there.
Mike Meltser with us here. You could listen to him on Sirius XM's Mad Dog Sports Radio. He's also a lawyer, and he's been all over this Deshaun Watson legal battle. Mike, take us back to the press conference that Rusty Hardin had. I believe it was last Friday. What were some of the big takeaways that you gathered from hearing Rusty speak publicly?
The biggest takeaway that people had, which didn't surprise me, is, Jake, Rusty Hardin admitted that were there occasions where there were consensual sexual acts between Watson and some of the accusers? Rusty said yes. That seemed to be like a big revelation to some people. It does not surprise me, because if you go back in the history of this, and we're only 4 weeks in, I think 4 weeks actually to the day of the filing of the first lawsuit, in a March 23rd statement by Rusty Hardin, and this was like the first comprehensive press release that the Hardin team had given, he had mentioned in one of the sentences that we are contending, like, absolutely, that Deshaun Watson never coerced anybody to commit any sexual act basically against their will. I'm paraphrasing, not directly quoting. And I thought even then they were laying the groundwork for what part of their defense was on Friday. I say defense loosely because that's really just the court of public opinion. They're not actually trying the case. And so I was not surprised that Rusty Hardin said consent. Jake, let me put it this way. While this case and what may happen is complex, I actually think the defenses here would be relatively simple. If someone is accused of the things that Deshaun Watson is accused of doing, to me, the defenses would be this. Number one, we never met. I have no idea who this person is. We never met. Number two, the things that they are accusing me of doing or of things happening never actually happened. That's 2. And 3, even if they did happen, anything that did happen was completely consensual. Like, those are the 3 main defenses. There are some gray areas, Jake, especially within, that third one about expectations on either side. But in terms of the defenses, I think there are 3 main defenses, and I'm sure Rusty's going to use maybe a combination of 2 and 3. But the fact that he mentioned consent seems to be big to others. It did not surprise me. He also tried to explain how many massage therapists Deshaun Watson had. I don't think, and Rusty's a legend, who am I to comment and analyze, what he does from a lawyer standpoint, but in terms of a press conference, that's my wheelhouse. I've been in the media for a while, so I think I can evaluate that. When Rusty Hardin tried to explain away how many massage therapists Deshaun Watson had by saying, hey, this is a franchise quarterback, he has a complicated schedule, he doesn't know when he's going to be available on certain days, this is why he was getting 2 or 3 massages a week and going to so many people. My instant thought, Jake, was, well, wait a second. This is a franchise quarterback. He absolutely has the kind of money to retain a massage therapist. Even if it was retaining like 1 in the mornings and 1 at night, he could afford that. And so I felt that explanation was a bit lacking from Rusty Hardin.
Mike, another thing that Rusty said that I wanted your thoughts on, he basically acknowledged, I'm not really, adverse on social media and not really in the know on how Instagram was used. And I thought that kind of hurt Watson's camp's, credibility, because I don't know if, like, in the court of public opinion, people really want to hear, Rusty Hardin say that, because, to anyone that's just, looking at this, from afar, you hear a guy that's a millionaire that has all the resources available to him using Instagram to get, all these different massages. It sounds sleazy, and I thought the justification of that did not paint Deshaun Watson in a great light.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jake, because multiple people I respect in the legal profession who I've talked to have different opinions about what Rusty said, because I've had someone I highly respect say, hey, one of the things about getting older is you have to keep up with technology. Like, you can't just decide at a certain point, like, nope, I'm not going to go to where the kids are now. And then it leads to things like Rusty Hardin saying, hey, the kids, they live their life on Instagram, on Twitter and Facebook. This is all new to me. Versus, other people I respect who are like, listen, Rusty's just kind of trying to paint a picture. What he says in a press conference about that is not so much a big deal. What I kind of wonder is, like, this is obviously Rusty Hardin's like main priority right now, this case. I mean, Rusty is a well-known attorney. I would have to think, especially like these days, Jake, when you get into discovery, we're talking not just phone calls and text messages, and this is discovery for like any case. You're talking about Facebook and Facebook messages and social media. So I'm a little surprised for an attorney who does pretty high-profile legal work to make it seem on Friday like he wasn't so familiar with Instagram, because it's not that crazy that Instagram would come up in the discovery process in this day and age.
Mike Meltser with us here. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Meltser. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's hard to fathom, where things go as far as, football wise, Mike. I mean, I have talked about this on the show before. I feel as if we were a lot closer to the season, Deshaun would probably be placed on this commissioner's exempt list. Do you get a sense that as we get closer and these cases are still ongoing, that happens? Or because they're all civil suits and there still haven't been any criminal charges that have been filed, maybe he just won't be placed on this exempt list? What's your take there?
I think, Jake, the criminal complaints and the Houston Police Department investigation has to be a significant part of what the NFL is thinking with regards to the exempt list, because if there are criminal charges, then you've got to believe that the police and or the district attorney feel like, hey, there's probable cause. There's at least a decent chance of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, if not getting some sort of favorable plea for the state, I guess. So that would be a significant factor. But what is fascinating is the investigation going to wrap up by the time the NFL has to make a decision? I'm not sure. We also simultaneously have an NFL investigation that's been going on essentially since the filing of the first lawsuit. The NFL, how is that investigation going? And one thing we know is the NFL does not have subpoena power, so they can't force people to talk to them. I think if you were to ask me like last week, Jake, at this time when Tony Busby held that very damaging news conference to Deshaun, I feel as though if you asked me to bet, I would say if all of this was still going on by the time training camp rolls around, yes, there's a solid chance of the commissioner's exempt list. But the weird part to me, Jake, is people seem to be treating that exempt list as if it's some sort of indefinite suspension. I'm not so sure that being on the commissioner's exempt list is such a terrible thing for Deshaun Watson in the sense that he would still be getting paid. And if he doesn't want to play for the Houston Texans, which we assume that stance hasn't changed, then how much is he really harmed by being on the exempt list if he wasn't going to be traded in that time period anyway? So I guess right now I would lean towards maybe yes on the exempt list, but we still have about 3 months or so until training camp really starts to get going.
Deshaun originally said he's not showing up, trade me, I'll never play for the Texans again. But now I wonder, Mike, would he show up? Because Rusty Hardin, I'd imagine, and you could speak to this, he's probably not cheap, so the NFL just maybe has to put him on that list to avoid, the media firestorm of Deshaun showing up, to Texans training camp after all. And while these are, 22 plus civil suits and whatever else happens with the criminal investigation are still ongoing.
Yeah, it's an interesting wrinkle to this because, so you can take it a couple of ways, Jake. If the NFL does not put Deshaun Watson on the exempt list, he still may not show up anyway. And if that is his plan, then I'm guessing the NFL would certainly know about that. And they might feel like, hey, we don't actually need to do anything. He doesn't want to play there, so he'll just stay away.
Shouldn't he just show up, though, so he gets paid, right?
Well, yes. So that's the thing. If he is on the exempt list, he has to show up to get paid.
Yep.
Like, he has to report for, I don't know, a couple of minutes, an hour or something like that. So he has to go, and then they tell him, hey, you're on the exempt list, and you're basically put on ice. So I don't know what that scene would be like if he was put on the exempt list. Like, would people be tracking him like it's it's some sort of a high-speed chase into NRG Stadium? But yes, he would have to show up to get paid if he was put on the exempt list.
I mean, it would be just a total heel move to show up knowing that by showing up, he still gets this money from the Texans. I mean, I wonder if the Texans then, could they step in and try and void part of his contract? How does that work?
Well, I think that's a different sphere. I mean, theoretically, they could do that right now if they were so inclined. The standard for the NFL is what's called conduct detrimental in terms of a suspension under the personal conduct policy. Conduct detrimental, what does that really mean? Nobody knows. It's kind of an open, broad definition. But if the Texans, let me put it this way, Jake, to answer your question, if the Texans were to release him, they would sustain such a damaging financial hit to their salary cap that they would be forced to go after his guarantees. And if they were so angry that would lead them to that decision, I think they would certainly do that. But I don't think that is a pressing issue right at this moment.
I got 30 seconds left, Mike. So gun to your head, is there any chance there's a trade of Deshaun Watson between now and the draft with all these ongoing investigations still taking place?
Always a chance, but I'll say, Jake, 0.25%.
I like it. Mike Meltser, lawyer and host on Sirius XM, Mad Dog Sports Radio. He's been all over this case. At Mike Meltser is where you can find him on Twitter. Mike, can't thank you enough. Thanks for coming on. We'll talk soon.
Jake, sounds good. Thank you.
Mike Meltser with us there on our progressive guest line. We'll take a quick break, wrap up hour 2 of our show. Jake Asman with you here on a Wednesday morning on Sports Map Radio.